Sam Black, it is lovely to have you on the Victory Channel. Thanks for being here.
It is always good to talk to you, Matt. Every time we see each other, I always get a smile on my face because I know we're going to have a good conversation.
Yeah, and you'll have to forgive me if I sound funny. I'm just getting over a cold, like I think everybody in the country. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but
It seems to be sweeping.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. Really looking forward to our conversation. For those who are unaware of you, who are you? What do you do? Why should we listen to you?
Well, since 2007, I have had the honor and privilege of working for Coverize. And currently I serve as the director for Life Change Recovery Education. And so my purpose is to help people learn more about how they can grow and find real healing in their hearts, minds, and spirits.
Would you say that the advice you would have given back in 2007, 2008 has greatly evolved, given your experience for so long a time?
Oh, that's like night and day. I think
Really?
I came in knowing I'm just getting a good start. You know, I'd spent my first career as a journalist, and I did that for 18 years. And it was such an honor to join the team at Covenant Eyes. And I've learned so much over the years. You and I have attended conferences together for at least a decade that I've known you. And haven't we learned so much over that time? And some great authors and leaders have stepped forward to really provide amazing education.
Well, look, so I'll go first, and then I'll ask you maybe what was some advice you gave, back in the day that now you wouldn't give. And so I'll lead since I thought of the question. Now I got to think on the spot, and then I'll see your answer. I think for me, I would fall into the trap of over-spiritualizing the problem. Not that it's not a spiritual issue in some sense, but that I didn't think holistically. That would be one fault I made. I would also say the other fault was I really just thought this was a male-only issue. And I'm embarrassed to say that now because we know it clearly isn't. So I think at the beginning, I was really quite stunned when I realized just how many young women and older women were looking at pornography as well. So I suppose those were just real quickly kind of two mistakes I had made, I think, that I've evolved in. What about you?
Well, I'll certainly identify with those two, that's for sure. I'll add one more, and this is going to sound crazy coming from the guy who works at Covenant Eyes. But that if I just told somebody that I was struggling, that would be enough. What I didn't know is I needed to have an ongoing relationship. And also, I needed to learn. I needed to understand how I got here, why I seemed to stay stuck, and how I needed to break free. And I think those three are one of the issues that most guys face. They don't know how they got to where they're at. And they're very confused about why they stay and why it seems to be so hard to break free.
Yeah. Now, you've just written a book that's going to be releasing soon. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's called The Healing Church, What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It. We have spoken to so many ministry leaders who have a good handle on the issue of pornography and how to help people overcome. But there are many, many more ministry leaders and pastors who are missing very important pieces of the puzzle that bring a clear picture. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to help provide a primer to help ministry leaders understand why men, women, teens are becoming stuck in pornography, why they are staying stuck, even though they've maybe talked to their pastor or ministry leader about, this is where I'm struggling. And they've prayed together, they've given some scripture to read and some things to do, but they're not really finding victory. So why is that? And what I did was start learning from what other churches are doing and gathered that information to put that in the book. So I interviewed more than 70 ministry leaders about this. How can the church, the local church, the church in your community become a healing church and address pornography? And when they can address pornography well, it turns out they can address many other problems well too.
It's interesting you say that, because another thing I've noticed as I travel the country and speak to people in recovery is when they begin to recover from pornography, well, everything gets better. You know, their marriages are deeper and more, what do you say, sort of substantial and rich and life-giving, even though the pain is there as well. What then are we getting wrong? What are churches getting wrong as they seek to address this issue?
Well, I think it was back one of the first things you talked about, that's that we can over spiritualize the issue. And there are many ministry leaders who kind of have created a checklist of, if I have offered a sermon or had a special speaker come at a men's ministry retreat, or we attended a large men's gathering and they talk about the issue of pornography, then those guys have received a warning. Those women unlikely have ever received that warning, but at least those men have received a warning. And that should be good enough. But the problem is purity sermons don't help very much, because most Christian men know they need to be pure.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to break free from that.
I want to go through these a little bit. I want to start with the spiritual issue. I think what's so difficult about this is when someone gives you the impression you just need to pray, you need to pray in this particular way, you need to say these particular words, you need to have this sort of prayer regiment, and you're there and you really do want to be free, and so you give your all into following these prayers. When it fails, or if it fails, and it does, I think, often if you don't have this holistic approach, you just settle on, well, I'm a failure. Like, it's kind of like it's like an argument that can't be disproved. Because if I am doing the spiritual activities and I'm falling, then it must be because I'm not doing them well enough. And that can lead to a lot of despair. What do you think?
I experienced that despair, to pray to God, Lord, just take this away from me, because I don't want to do this anymore. I hate myself with this. I just wish it would go away. Please take this from me. What I've learned is that prayer isn't unique to me or you or anybody else listening to this. That prayer has gone on for many times, right? But God calls us on a journey. He wants us to not just free us from this, as just here, let me ask for this, and presto, as a magician, I'm just going to give this to you. He says, no, I want you to resolve in your heart. And true repentance, true life change has to come through a journey. And you're going to have to lean into me. You're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to step into a community, a brotherhood or a sisterhood, and practice some James 5:16. We confess our sins to one another and pray for one another so that we may be healed. And we become very accustomed in our prayer life to just confess to God that the worst things, and we haven't leaned in to community, because we were wounded in community and we heal in community. So I think it's imperative to also understand, with this over spiritualized thing, is what else is there then? Well, I often consider the idea, when we are asking men and women and teens to break free from pornography, that it sounds like a little bit of just say no, because you have a choice. If you can choose what is righteous, or you can choose what is ungodly. The problem is that loses the history of how I got here in the first place. And so I host Samson Society newcomer meetings every Tuesday at 1:00. And the stories that men tell are my story repeated again and again. And that is early exposure. Three things that you often see. The early exposure, that often there was some drama or trauma early in their life, and the ongoing repetitive use to pornography that somewhere along the line just moved from just being curious about pornography, just moved away from just being a little lustful, but now became escapism. That became a place to hide. And by the time a young man or a young woman reaches adulthood, they have a 500-pound gorilla on their back who's orchestrating their decisions for them. It becomes compulsive for them to use pornography.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I like to think of food analogies sometimes. And I like your point about just seeing what choice are you making doesn't take into account where you've been. And so, if I was raised as a kid and I was perhaps given a poor diet and ate McDonald's most days or ate very sugary things, and then all of a sudden I decide I want to live differently, it's like, well, now I can choose. I can choose to eat, the meat and veggies, or I can choose to eat the fast food or the ice cream or what have you. And to only look at that snapshot of my life, you can see why it doesn't make sense. You have to kind of go back in time and say, well, how did you even arrive here at the first place? Now, I know eating poorly isn't the same thing as consuming pornography, but there is an analogy there, I think.
I agree with that. We are sexual beings, and we need food.
Mm-hmm.
But they can be very polluted. That behavior can be compulsive, and so we need to redeem how we behave with those.
So what then are some, perhaps, it's funny, I don't want to make this kind of dichotomy between spiritual and non-spiritual, because of course the spiritual ought to permeate every area of our life, including community, including self-betterment, etc. But perhaps what are some things that people might consider as non-churchy, non-spiritually, or non-spiritual? You've already mentioned leaning into community. I think also just like trusting in God and not expecting God to be a magician. What are some other things?
Well, I love to say we need a safe place and a safe process. The safe place is where you can begin to come as you are so that you can begin to receive healing. But a safe process allows you to be held in place where that healing can take place. So often we don't allow either the safe place or the safe process because we want to just heal on our own. And when we try to heal on our own, when we just try to white knuckle it a little harder, if I commit to this a little bit more, if I have just a little more strength, and if I just tackle this a little harder, I can overcome this. But we need a safe place to where we can lean into others and follow a safe process that helps us understand how God made our brain. Our neurology absolutely paves a way into wanting pornography as a compulsive thing. We have to understand how we are triggered, how trauma has impacted how we think. In marriage, we often say, you act just like your mother, or you just act like your father. Well, we've seen that in our lives, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for that. We've rehearsed and practiced some things from childhood and brought it into our marriages, and now they flood out. Well, the same thing about our choices and how we react to things is vitally important to our recovery, and we need to understand ourselves. We need to know ourselves. We've often thought of something as simple as anger as, well, I'm just road rage, for instance. When someone cuts you off in traffic, it's very easy to say, well, I just got angry and I lashed out or I yelled at somebody. But the truth is, you were cut off in traffic, and that brought fear into you, right? You were afraid of what would happen next. You were helpless and you weren't in control of what was happening. And so the lashing out is really a secondary thing of being cut off in traffic. That anger wasn't instantaneous. There was actually a process that happened. Now, that same thing is happening with our use of pornography, that we didn't instantly go, today I think I'm going to go out and use pornography.
Right.
Likely something is happening prior to that's leading you to crave pornography and act out.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know that's one of my biggest triggers, both for anger and for lust. If I feel out of control, I wanna control something. I wanna feel safe again. And as you've alluded to, if pornography is something you've been indulging since you were a young child, then it's kind of, you've been in a way Pavlovian. There's been a Pavlovian conditioning in a way. Do you think? Or not so
It
much?
sounds
Feel
so it sounds so ridiculous, right? Let me see if I can give a better example of this. When I was, and I tell this story in the book. When I was, I think about 12 years old, there was a rope, and this rope sat in the back of our pickup truck in Florida. And in Florida, it rains every day and it sunshines every day. And this hemp rope had become twisted and gnarled. And then it was thrown into a shed. And I was working with my dad in that shed. And he says, would you please take that rope and coil it up? And I was like, oh, yeah. So I began doing it hand over hand, right? Hand over elbow. He goes, no, 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 no. I want you to coil that rope hand over hand, just kind of loop it. I'd never done that before. And my home was violent. And I know I'm not telling this story so that our listeners feel sympathy or anything. I've been able to tell this story in recovery. So I think that's important for us to know. But when that rope that was so tortured in the sun and rain would loop or twist, he would hit me in the head, in the back, in the face. And so I would panic and I began rolling around my elbow again, and I get hit more and hit more. So let's fast forward to when I'm a teenager or an adult, and I still need to coil ropes. I still need to coil extension cords, coil my hose. Those kinds of things. So that very action wouldn't just make me remember that beating I took in a shed. I would go back in time and be there. And little did I know that later on that day, that would cause me to go seek out pornography. And whether that was revisiting the trauma that I wasn't worthy, or whether it would be escapism to run away from that trauma or those memories, that trigger would send me to pornography later that day. So I had to release that story within a group of other men to where they could speak life into my heart and really remind me that I didn't deserve those wounds, but really process those wounds. I would then begin a different way of looking at coiling a rope. I would take an extension cord or rope and I would sing. And I would sing, how deep the Father's love for us. And that not only had a good beat, but it nurtured my soul. It brought my Heavenly Father into a memory where my Heavenly Father is in control of that memory, where He is there with me. So healing from our wounds also means that not only am I not acting out with pornography, I didn't have to yell at my kids because of that tension I was feeling. I didn't have to argue with my wife because of the anger that would build up in me. I didn't even, I would try to shove it down, push it away. But when we experience God's healing, like you said, it impacts every part of our lives.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that. I mean, this men's group, obviously something was happening perhaps within a church setting and they were doing it right. What do you mind me asking what that setting was?
Well, this is where it started. I had become an agnostic. I was married to a wonderful, beautiful wife, and we're still married today. And she had begun attending church. And she asked if I would go with her, and I often hem-hawed around about why I couldn't go, or maybe I'll do that someday. And there had become a marriage class, a Sunday school class that we could go to. And she said, hey, would you please attend this marriage class with me? And I knew our marriage needed help. And when I walked into that class, the leaders were just a little bit nuts, and they would close the door and they would say, what's said here stays here. This is a safe place. as we went through that class, I heard people talking about terrible things they said to their spouse, or the ugly words that they say, or the way they acted out in different ways. It was like, I've never experienced church like this.
Wow. Yeah, it's like the opposite of the idea many people have about
Yeah.
church, namely you go there to put your best self forward.
Well, the teachers had gone through AA.
Hmm.
And so through that 12-step understanding, that's where I discovered that pornography could be compulsive and
Yeah.
addictive. And that was a great relief, because that meant I didn't have to, evolution didn't make me this way, and God didn't make me this way, and I didn't have to stay this way.
Hmm.
And then taking a journey with other men, little by little, over time, I learned to live in freedom, learned to grow in freedom.
Okay, so we've talked about what the church might get wrong, namely over spiritualize an issue, perhaps because they don't understand it. And it's difficult to criticize somebody who's just saying, just pray more. You can't be like, well, that's actually not technical. It's like, it
No,
feels
that's good.
impenetrable. Of course you should be praying, but what did this church do that perhaps other churches could replicate? Maybe connecting with an SA group, or what do you think?
I That's where I want to say that's where I got my start.
Mm-hmm.
But when I really moved outside of the church, things like Samson Society,
Mm.
the seven pillars program through Pure Desire, those are places where I got a better understanding of
Mm.
where the struggle went more deeply,
For
or
those of
where I could
us,
lean in.
I'm unaware of both of those things you've mentioned. Would you mind briefly telling us about each?
Yeah, this is a example of the seven pillars workbook.
Okay. Yeah.
And Pure Desire, this book goes along with it. Pure Desire Ministries is, you can look them up online. I think it's puredesire.com. SamsonSociety.com is a place where it's a community of Christian men,
Mm-hmm.
where they get together and talk. And that's both in person as well as on Zoom calls. And if you visit SamsonSociety.com and would like to join, you can click that link to find a newcomer meeting. And once you attend a newcomer meeting, we'll explain everything about how it works and help you get started.
Terrific. Thanks.
Another piece of living with other men was using Covenant Eyes on
Yeah.
our devices. And I raised my kids with Covenant Eyes.
Hmm.
And that just was just the reminder that it was there made me understand that I had a commitment to someone else.
That's right.
Could I have gone down to a convenience store or something else? Yes, absolutely. I could have found pornography. In fact, I think 5 miles from my house, there was an actual porn store on the interstate.
Hmm.
But there's a commitment you make to someone else. And I think it's vitally important that you must have other people in your life. Samson Society is a great place to find an ally, a friend that can walk with you. They call him a Silas. And that Silas is someone who just walks with you and throughout your journey. So I think having tools like this, like the seven pillars or things, the Samson Society, those become safe places and safe processes to learn and grow.
Yeah.
We have also released a new resource from Covenant Eyes called the Life Change Workbook.
I know what's great about Coverize is many of these things, maybe not this, but you have many ebooks that you just guys give away for free that have been so well researched. Is this one of those things, or is this something different?
This is a brand new workbook that you can buy called Life Change: A Biblical Journey to Freedom. And it's a 12-week study for you and your ally or your church small group. So 12 weeks walks you through and gives you an understanding of, how did I get here? Why do I need to dig back in my life to find what's going on? And how do I begin a road to freedom? Just a very excellent resource. There's another great resource called Victory by Covenant Eyes, and it's available in the App Store or the Play Store. It's a free download, so you can join there. And there is a learning tab within there that walks you through your first steps of a journey. These courses It's a lot of material in there that really help you dig deeper into, again, how did I get here? Why do I keep staying here? And
Yeah.
this is my road to freedom.
It can feel so exhausting and overwhelming, can't it? When you just, if you haven't really begun the path to freedom, it can just feel like, well, there's an Everest to climb and you can do it. But in my own life, what I've found is, if we want to stay with that analogy, as I've begun to climb the mountain, what I find is I feel like I have more energy with every step I take, like double the amount of energy with every step, because I suppose the full healing of my own heart and mind will take place in heaven. So it's not a one and done thing here, but as I continue to heal in this area of my life, like we keep coming back to, I find that my relationship with my children, my relationship with my wife and my friends and my work just gets more and more free, beautiful, good, the way it ought to be. And that then makes me want to keep going down this path to freedom, even though at times healing can hurt, man, can't it? I mean, looking into those
Healing
places, oh, it hurts. And sometimes you just want to like, oh, forget about it. I don't even want to go there. It's sort of like when you're if you've ever played out in the snow and maybe you didn't have gloves on and your hands are freezing cold and you run inside and you got to put them by the heater and it just stings to high heaven. And you think maybe it was better out there where my hands were freezing. And it's not. It's just that this healing can be painful sometimes.
I've got to say this because I hear what you're saying. I stopped viewing pornography long before I began finding more wholeness in my life. Because when we're experiencing wholeness in your life, it's not just about the presenting issue. There was a reason I was watching pornography. There was a reason I was belting out in anger. There was a reason why I felt feelings of condemnation. Well, digging into that and finding that healing through Christ, finding that healing through a body of Christ, a community, man, it opens the doors, the floodgates to so many more ways of living in sanctification and living in life change and life growth. You can make different choices because your capacity has grown from, my capacity was this small piece and I had to control it and keep tabs on it. And as I allowed that healing to begin, well, now my capacity grew greater to have empathy for others, to serve others, to be more caring toward my wife, my children, have conversations with them, not to lash out when I thought I was either not in control or felt someone didn't speak to me in exactly the right way or said something I took an offense at. That growth just impacts every part of your life, but we don't get there on our own. Pastor Jack West from Mariners Church had this great illustration. And he said, when we find ourselves in a cage of our own making, and we have put the blocks in place, we have put the bars in place, and we throw away the key. Nobody keeps the key. And until someone else comes and helps us unlock that door, we sit around in that cage chasing our tail, thinking that we're finding our way out, and what we're doing is just wearing a hole in the floor.
Wow. Getting deeper and deeper into it to extend the analogy.
To extend the analogy, for sure. Yeah. And so we need one another to open those bars, and then we need to be let out. And just maybe we think that pornography, if we just get rid of pornography, that's the only thing that I'm going to get out of this. The truth is you're going to get so much more. You get to live.
Yeah. Pornography
makes all these promises about excitement and how much more manly you might be, but it's all fantasy. It's all an illusion.
I was going to speak into that if you don't mind, because I know sometimes
please.
When people think of going to see, say, a certified sex addiction therapist, or going to an SA meeting, or one of these Samson meetings that you referred to, or getting covenantized, I remember having a conversation with someone who said, I don't know, like, isn't that a little kind of, and he was getting at like wussy. Do you say that in America? Wussy?
We do indeed, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know what possessed me to say this. I hope it was the Holy Spirit. And I went, yeah, no, you're right. Why don't you just keep masturbating to your iPhone? That's way manlier. And I hope that in saying that, it exposed it. It's like, you can keep going down this dead-end road that promises you a masculine behavior, but is actually a very pathetic one that even a chimp should be ashamed of. Or you could actually make a step in the right direction, regardless if right now it seems wussy. Now, I wouldn't take that tactic with everybody, of course, but it seemed to really work with him.
That's funny. Yeah, go ahead. I think you
Well, I mean, we've talked about a number of things. What would be? I imagine we're going to have many ministry leaders and pastors watch this, and they want to go, okay, but what's something I can do? You can give me a list of resources, and maybe that's a start. What's something I can do this Sunday or today to help my congregation?
Well, I think the first thing a pastor really needs to do is really understand the issue. And that's why I wrote The Healing Church, is once you begin to grasp the severity of the trap, the pernicious nature of pornography, it creates a greater empathy toward those whom you are serving. And with that empathy, you want to give more than just a warning. And you want to be able to begin starting to create a culture where there are safe places in your church where people can truly practice James 5:16 and begin that healing process. I was at a conference, and I was speaking to a pastor of a small church. And he says, because our church is so small, I think it's really hard for people to talk to one another honestly about their sins and things they're consuming in their life, like pornography. And then I went right after that. I spoke to him. I spoke to another couple, and they knew that I worked for Covenant Eyes, and they said, "Oh, we need your help. We're looking for an ally that can receive my husband's reports." And he says, "Yes, I attend a church of about 3,000, and I can't find someone to be my ally. I want to know someone I can trust." So it's not the size of our churches that's the issue. It's not that there is some churches have more resources and small groups, etc. It's that fundamentally we have to ask ourselves, what part of James 5:16 do we not believe? What part of our church culture says it's not okay to have issues in my life that we as brothers and sisters of Christ can't support and help one another? We're fine with baking some cookies or taking over a dinner to someone who's sick. But when sickness becomes sin, how much are we willing to work and serve for that?
There's this, it's from St. Paul, it might be Galatians, you'll probably know better than me, where Paul says, if a brother is enmeshed or immersed in sin, you who are spiritual ought to correct him with a spirit of gentleness. What I love about that is typically what we wish to do if we love another. We want to correct them and we want to be gentle. Well, the same would apply to ourselves. What about when we're immersed in sin or when we fall down? How come we throw St. Paul's advice out the window and we start hammering on ourselves and telling ourselves what pieces of garbage we are? Not only is that not true, like you're actually not a piece of garbage, whether you think you are or not, it's also just not pragmatic because it'll just drive you further and further into that hole. But yeah, understanding the issue helps us to be more empathetic with those who are struggling.
I think there's a command in there. We often look at it as, you who are spiritually mature, gently correct, that there's kind of like a process. But there's also command in there that says, hey, step up. You have been walking with me. I haven't given you this honor of walking with me and my love, my gift for you. And you have to give it away to others. You have to give away the healing that you've received to others. And that's going to require some empathy from you, some patience with you, some understanding and learning from you. to lead others and care for others. And
Mm.
so when we, as ministry leaders and pastors, look at our church, we have to really think about, how can I take my first steps toward creating a safe place where people can be honest about what they're dealing with in life, whether it's pornography or food or any number of things that's happening in their life that are the coping mechanisms for living. And so that might start with a sermon.
Yeah.
It might start with some vulnerability from the pastors. And I know a lot of pastors are very scared about this, that, hey, if I'm vulnerable at all with any of my feelings, people are going to not want to follow me. They're going to leave the church. They're going to kick me out. I attended a conference where a pastor said to me, he said, let me get this right. You want me to use covenant eyes on my devices and be accountable to another man. I don't talk to anybody but my wife, because if I told anyone else, they would crucify me. Those are his words. Now, that is a church that has not created any culture where we can practice care for one another.
Right.
Where we can practice James 5:16, where we can live, we can lean in to sanctification, to lean in to community with one another. And so if we can't even allow the pastor to have any issue whatsoever, my goodness, how can anybody in the church feel comfortable as well? Because now they have to live up to this grandiose spiritual religiosity that is empty, that is really empty.
How does one walk that fine line then between being vulnerable without scandalizing? I mean, there are certain things that I wouldn't want strangers knowing about my life, including strangers that I might minister to. And I think there's healthy boundaries there. So how would a pastor or a ministry leader find that balance?
I think that's very good. I think we can create safe pockets where a pastor doesn't need to confess everything that is going on in his life, but he should be telling his congregation that, listen, I have a group of pastors who hold me accountable.
Yeah.
We talk about very deep and serious things. I talk about sin in my life. Mm-hmm. And when you model that, my pastor does that. He has, within our district, he has other pastors that he is meeting with, and they are truly digging deep, because he talks about it with me personally. He talks about it from the pulpit. He is communicating the importance of his relationship with other pastors so that he can live a godly life, protect his ministry, etc. But at the same time, he is also showing that, listen, you can meet with this group. If you're struggling, please come to me, let me know, because I know people in our church who you can talk with. And when typically those small groups, that's maybe 2 or 3, begin to blossom. And here's one thing that you'll understand very well, Matt, is when people find their way through life change, when people find their heart renewed, when people find healing, they can't help but give it away. Mm-hmm. And so when you start this process and you're creating safety for one, you're actually creating safety for many others, who are then creating safety for others. And then soon you're having a safe church. Yeah. But often we have left that in a very closed counseling session in the church. I was speaking to a pastor, and he said, Sam, I know just what you're talking about, this issue of pornography. I was counseling man for 3 hours last week on his struggle with pornography. I said, that's great, but are you going to do that next week? Do you have time for that? Yes. Well, no. Well, no. The pastor can't do this work. So the pastor is setting the culture and setting a means for
Yeah.
creating a healing church. And as he disciples one
Yeah.
who finds healing and recovery, the, the steps, in the 12 steps, you've had a spiritual awakening. And from that spiritual awakening, you can help but
Yeah.
serve others. You don't keep it to yourself, you give it
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing to say go to a priest or a pastor and have them say, there's a group in this church that meet at this time, and I want to invite you to be a part of that, like to connect people with community. How, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can help, be it Covenant Eyes or this book or that book or this online
Mhm.
thing, but being able to connect people, yeah, very
And
important.
sometimes that group may not all be struggling with the same thing, but they're an empathetic group that is supporting one
Yeah,
another.
I see.
Depending on the size of your church, there's no reason that a pastor can't say, well, I want you to get connected to samsonsociety.com because you need a
Yeah,
regular meeting. Uh, let's say it's a small church and the local pastor or ministry leader is the one that they're first connecting with. Well, they can begin, maybe an ongoing discussion, but he needs to connect him with other men who have an understanding of the same struggle. So Samson Society, Pure Desire, uh, getting covenant eyes, these are tools that begin a pathway of learning and growth, right?
yeah, yeah. I got
But
a question.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, there might be someone out there who thinks, well, look, I want to be able to address this, but if I was to say, well, next Wednesday we're going to have a night on how to be sexually pure, that might scare a lot of people off. And I want to use the time when I have the most people in front of me to address this issue, to say, listen, you're not alone in this struggle, there's help for you. But I
Yeah.
also don't want to scandalize any children that might be in the congregation. What's your advice to them?
There is no reason that we can't have age appropriate conversations. And the first thing I'm going to say is that many churches probably think we shouldn't let the teenagers know anything about this because it'll just make them curious and they'll go find pornography. Our problem with that is they've likely already found pornography. So we know,
Yeah,
based on many surveys and our own experiences, often between 8 and 11 and 12, boys and girls are finding pornography, whether they're being introduced to it by a friend or finding it online. You and I have both heard anecdotal stories from parents who know their children were exposed at 5 or 6 or 7.
hmm,
Um, so I think it's imperative that the church kind of step up to this understanding that if we don't help equip parents to talk about this, they're likely not going to talk about it. So I think it's important that we don't miss that step because another generation is coming up
yeah,
that is unprepared. And never have I ever spoken to anyone who said, because I trained and educated my child about pornography, it made them
yeah.
curious and went there.
It's kind
Instead,
of
it's
like,
always the opposite of that.
yeah, it's kind of like maybe cigarettes or drug use. Just because I tell my child about that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to seek out drugs. Probably the contrary. The difference, however, is that it's drug use is not as anonymous and immediate as pornography is. I like what Father Sean Kilcoley suggested, and you tell me what you think. He said that from the pulpit, especially if you've got young children, he said I'd recommend talking about those dark places on the internet. And
Oh, yes.
the nice thing about phrasing it that way is if you have been exposed to pornography, if you do know what pornography is, you know what the minister's talking about. If you
Hmm.
don't, and you're too young, you might think that the minister's talking about vampires or monsters or something. But I like that. If you find yourself addicted to those dark places on the internet, and away you go, or we'd like to help your children with those dark places on the internet. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I've spoken at many homeschool conferences where families would bring their children in. One, some of them knew that their children had already been exposed, but I would often say, let me start off this by I'm going to speak in code, and you'll know exactly what
Mm,
I'm talking about when I say inappropriate online content or inappropriate content. And everybody knows why they're there. Everybody knows what I'm going to be talking about. So I never have to say pornography or anything like that. It just comes, and everybody knows what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
When I'm talking about carrying age-appropriate conversations, is we have a conversation with our parents to teach and train them and let them know the resources that are available so they can talk to their kids. Maybe there is a family night for teens where you can talk about the impact for that. But I think it's very important we just train our parents well so that parents in turn can train their kids. In a broad congregation, might be a great opportunity to make everyone feel comfortable by allowing the kids to be in a different room and having a great time doing something else. And if you can't do that, then dark places on the internet or inappropriate content online is a perfect way to jump over that hurdle.
Yeah. What are some of the best kind of kids resources, by which I mean things for parents to introduce the topic of pornography to their kids? What are some of the things that you would recommend? Because if you, I mean, I have a few in mind, but these are things that pastors could buy and put in the back of their churches that they could give away as gifts on a particular day, depending on the content and whether it's appropriate. But
well, Coverize is a great resource for pastors and ministry leaders called Safe Haven Sunday. And so this is a program you can bring to your church, and it provides a little booklets that provide you training for your parents so they understand how to begin having this conversation with their kids. We want to, and that's just an amazing resource. You can find it at covenanteyes.com. Look for Safe Haven Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
Our church support team can help you with that too. Simply calling 989-720-8000 is a great way to get in contact with our church support team.
You guys are the best. I love it. What I love about Coverize too is when you call them, you expect the same experience as when you call most businesses, which is namely just the worst. They're just trying to get you off the phone as quickly as they can. My experience is when you call Coverize, they will sit on the phone with you until they've got you sorted. Just throw that number out one more time, would you?
989-720-8000.
Great, thank you.
We follow something called HOPS that's our internal. It's honor God, optimism, passion for excellence, and service to others. So when you talk to someone, one of our member care agents or a member of our church support team, you're talking to a real life human being who wants to make sure that you and your family or your church is well taken care of. And whatever time that takes, that's where we're going to lean into that. And we staff that very purposely for that.
Wow.
On average, more than 90% of our calls were answered in the first minute by a real human being.
Wow, man. Okay, so maybe take this opportunity to tell us about a few more resources that you'd recommend as we wrap up today, and then I want to talk about your book and the URL, etc.
Well, we do have an amazing number of resources that I can post for. I'm sure you have some links that you can add to this.
You know what? If you email me, Sam, right off, or if you just email me a series of links, I'll be sure that all goes in the show notes so I don't miss anything.
Yeah, so we have resources for men, women, teens, families. So we want to really help equip. So I'm going to send you a number of links that you can offer to our listeners.
Great.
To get started. And of course, thehealingchurch.com will also help you communicate.
Thehealingchurch.com. Okay.
Thehealingchurch.com.
All right, excellent. And then, of course, strive21.com is a 21-day detox from porn course that I created. If you're a man out there who, wants to, what would I say to you if we could have coffee? That's how I like to express it. Over 21 days, this would be it. We've had tens of thousands of men go through it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. It's completely free, too. There's no hidden fees or anything like that. Strive21.com to check that out. I know there's great things out there for ladies as well, and that we're looking at working on a course right now for women, Sam, but does anything come to mind that you would recommend if a young woman is watching or a ministry leader who would like to help women in their area?
One of the great resources for women on our website is you can find it at covenanteyes.com /women's-resources. Again, that's women's-resources.
Okay.
On that page, you're going to find video and blog posts and a book called New Fruit, a guide to women's recovery. Those tools are just a great place to really begin understanding how pornography impacts women specifically.
That's excellent. I know for our Catholic listeners, magdalaministries.org would be a great place if you're a woman who wants to be free of pornography, or if you're a pastor who's working with people and you want to help them. So there's that as well.
We've also just created a brand new course in the Victory app by Covenant Eyes for women as well.
It's out?
Yes.
What?
There's a lot of great learning pieces and courses and they're all free.
How do I get there?
So get to download the Covenant Eyes. The Victory app by Covenant Eyes. Okay. I'm going to say that again so it's real easy.
Yeah.
Download the Victory app by Covenant Eyes to your phone, tablet, and whether it's iPhone or Android.
Fantastic.
And that's a free downloadable app, and you can begin going through 20 separate courses, and they're all free. And we're just getting ready to add video or audio to all of it.
Great.
So you can listen while you're going down the road or while you're at the gym.
Sam,
and it's all free.
You're the man. Thank you so much for all. I'm not just saying this because you're on my show and I'm going to be nice to you. I really mean it at this point, okay? I'm so glad that you've dedicated so much of your life to this, to helping men and women and children. We're so grateful to you and all the team at Coverize. Any final words before we wrap up?
Matt, it's just such a wonderful time to be with you. I'm grateful it's been too long since we've seen each other. And I'm just really hope that this time has been an encouragement to individuals, ministry leaders, and pastors. That's where my heart is. I know that so many ministry leaders want to help, just don't know where to get started well.
Yeah. All right, Sam, God bless you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. God bless you.